Hi, everyone. Thanks once again so much for joining us. My name is Kay Gabriel. I use she and her pronouns. And
Hi,
welcome
I'm
to the February and March curation of the Segue Reading Series.
I'm Imogen Christian Smith. Sorry, Kay. I use they, them pronouns, and welcome. Before we get started, we want to first acknowledge that we're calling from Lenape-Hoking on the traditional lands of the Lenape, Shinnecock, Munsee, and Canarsie peoples. The resources used in the production of this series have been culled from stolen lands far and near, that both artist space as well as our homes are places of commune, work, and learning were built by hands other than our own, by people with varying histories, traditions, hopes, mourning, and vision for the ongoingness of their communities. We encourage participants in this gathering to learn about the history of the land where they live and the contemporary structures of possession and dispossession that we can intervene in principled and solidaristic ways against the contemporary regimes of capital, colony, and property.
So we're about halfway through. This is our fourth reading in Imogen's and my curation. And when we started, 4 weeks ago, it was already dark outside in our homes here in the Northeast. And now there's sort of a glimmer of sun, which for me is like a serotonin boost straight to the brain. And I'm reminded of that Diane de Prima poem that was circulating a lot around the time of her death about the solstice, that the world will get brighter whether or not we want it to. So that's in my mind a lot right now. We're really excited to present readings over the next 5 Saturdays, broadcasting from our homes to yours. After today's reading with Miguel Gutierrez and Ishmael Houston Jones, we'll hear from Nicholas Glastonbury and John Keane, Amber Dawn and Kai Cheng Tom, Jackie S. and Diana Cage, and finally Anne Duplan and Legacy Russell. The readings are presented and recorded through Artist Space, and we want to say thank you to the Artist Space staff, Izzy Dow, Stella Silman, Jay Sanders, and Eric Wren, who designed our publicity for this series. The readings broadcast every Saturday at 5 Eastern Standard Time, so mark your calendars and tell your friends, and they'll be recorded and they live online afterwards on the Artist Space website. The suggested donation tonight is $5. You can find donation info on the tile that we post during intermission. You can also find it in the chat. You can donate via PayPal, Venmo, or through the through the Segue website. And once again, check the chat for specific links to those. And here's the run of show for tonight. First, Imogen will introduce Miguel, then Miguel will read. We'll have an intermission about 5 to 7 minutes long. I will introduce Ishmael. Ishmael will read, and we will finish with a Q&A. We invite you guys to use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. So you can to use that for questions as opposed to the chat. So you should see that on the sort of the lower bar, and that way we can keep track of them. So you can use the screen to say nice things about the readers, and we don't lose your questions in the bunch. Don't be shy.
All right, getting things started here. Miguel Gutierrez is an artist, educator, and Feldenkrais method practitioner based in Lenape-Hoking, Brooklyn. Recent performance and music projects include This Bridge Called My Ass and Sedona, the Brown Ambition Tour. Forthcoming, Wearing the Mask, a new album, The Things You Should Have Done, an anthology of writing, and Are You for Sale, a podcast about the ethical entanglements in dance making and philanthropy. To borrow briefly some art world jingoisms all of us should push back against, if not directly tossed to barrel, Miguel Gutierrez is an emerging artist, an elder, a mid-career artist, a journey them, a punk at once established and iconoclastic, with all of this being the point. The through line one reads like scansion in his scores, the neon pop and playfulness of works, asking with such sincerity, what the hell is this body, this flux fucking with time and decay far beyond aesthetic form, always reaching to articulate the communal beyond a singular body, celebrity, theory, or joke within a 20th, 21st century ongoingness of, quote, topographical ruptures, end quote. Colombian kid come queer nation, downtown dance all the way from SF to Brown. Could have been nobody, could have been somebody. And when Miguel quotes William Blake at the opening of a performance of Age and Beauty Part 1, I have 1,000 and 10,000 things to say to you. My heart is full of futurity. We are welcomed into the ever widening circle that is MG's craft and lineage. Memory, Munoz writes, is most certainly constructed and, more importantly, always political. Gutierrez, in their essay for Baum entitled Does Abstraction Belong to White People, might add, quote, the swarm of rage and sadness frames my vision, butts up against my belief in possibility and change. Is the quantity of this belief measurable, distinct? What amount of my cellular makeup is caught up in this feeling or in the matrix of melancholy as I mull over a litter of injustices, personal or systemic, that occupy my awareness? Am I a subject or a vessel, an agent or a channel? End quote. In works bopping through time, sex, age, their consequences and resonances, Gutierrez, whether choreographically, musically, poetically, or academically, posits matrices pushing at the notion of a singular subject, a singular MG, gesturing towards a body in physical, temporal, political sex flux, working it out on the Marley. Agent and channel, Miguel's work asks us to love, literally to love the messes we make, the ones we've come from and shape, often in caricature, like the faggots and their friends, a wink and nod, a premonition in reverse, cruising beneath canopies of incomplete tellings from Judson to MoMA to St. Mark's Church. To quote Gutierrez, quoting his father in the piece Unsustainable Solutions, duet with my dead dad, the men observed that, quote, at the moment the two sections meet and interchange, there you have the wormhole. A slice of you interchanged, one dimension to another, one world to another. And what is life anyway? It's some abstractions. Subject, agent, vessel, and rearrange. Still, a body in performance isn't some pliable mannequin, reducible to calculated aesthetic abstraction. Witness the ecstatic mess of this bridge called my ass, its Latinx quasi-utopias wink-winking of public sexuality that rattles the heart of Euro-American so-called ethics, waving towards familial dramas, queer and lineal, through recall, telenovela, winding up somewhere mysteriously spiritual, a form of dog worship comes straight from Jodorowsky. Documenting lineage is one nexus for Gutierrez's person and work, the word here pointing toward the impression of moments bounding temporalities, the surprises of play and violence of inevitability, both being political issues. What's once touched is later heard, seen, retouched, re-remembered, disemboweled expansively, and documentation, or performance, dance, whatever, serves as dexterous impression of gestures, feelings, the somehow immaterial material pumping through root and consequence, aka futurity. The work wants to offer us sustainable solutions to being here, meaning rather straightforwardly, surviving in the world with a sense of love, play, tenderness, curiosity, grief, addiction, and letting go, regenerative, broken, and also intact. Perhaps this is why Miguel's work has of late coalesced around such seemingly disparate fields as Feldenkrais or finishing degrees, is why they're so tenderly skilled at curating rooms to navigate the frolic and perilousness of study, why they'll host hard conversations about money management, budgeting for artists, cast, crew, and incubation on stolen land. What makes Miguel's work so enduring, so daring and elastic, is its open love affair with earnestness. Miguel is the type of performer who will weep at his own piece, break the fourth wall, yell at you to leave when it's over, and laugh at his own incongruity. So much of his practice is that of listening across time, lineage, to younger artists and elders, spinning new modes of connection. My many conversations, moments of rest, Shopping sprees, beach jaunts, and not a few arguments with Miguel have made real these leaps through queer time. The aspirational gaze in his life and work, continuously diving deep, expunging, dealing with the body's many disintegrations and realignments, entangling themselves in muscle, lyric, elegy, born anew with sad hot takes vis-a-vis Madonna's pop zooming at you from a 40-something's bedroom. Artists in New York have their phases of pining for some long gone idealization of the city and its various schools, accurate or not. Who wouldn't give bags of makeup and glitter to have been in Miguel's loft circa 2002 for Enter the Scene, to have witnessed Last Meadow or any of the Age and Beauties in person? Thankfully, equally informed by queer social history and camp, Gutierrez is a consummate documentarian. I think of a favorite passage from his chapbook, Blowjobs, I Like Him, My Friend is Dead, that pretty much sums them up. I'll be thinking of you on my bike. I'll think of you in the circle at the end of the meeting. I'll think of you at the beach and when I walk by the shop. I can't say what I'll think of you, leaning and smoking and peering out over the possibilities. They grow and shrink, right? They're limitless and circumscribed. It's this fucking curse we know, we learn to call it living, of course. I hope. Let me go back a line. They're limitless and circumscribed. It's this fucking curse. We know. We learn to call it living, of course. I hope you'll save it for the right ones. Everyone, please help me in welcoming Miguel Gutierrez.
Ooh, wow. Thank you, Imogen. You fucked me up. That was really special. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Imogen. Thank you, Kay. Thanks for inviting me to do this. Thank you, Ishmael. I love you, abuelo. So happy to share this reading with you. Thank you, Artist Space, Jay, James, and I'm just like messed up right now. I don't even know how to go forward. Anyway, let's take a moment. So I want to read. I want to start my timer because I try to be respectful about time. No, don't be sorry. It's great. I want to read new work. I want to read new pieces. I'm going to read a short piece. Then I'm going to read a longer piece. Then I'm going to let the timer stop me wherever I am in that longer piece because I want to show you another piece on video. Unless I feel so strongly about the piece I'm reading that I break my own rule, which is entirely possible. And yeah, I just want to acknowledge that I'm coming to you from Lenapehoking, also from an area that we now call Brooklyn. And fuck white supremacy, y'all. It's good to say it whenever you can. And I'm wearing repping for Viva Ruiz and her incredible Thank God for Abortion project. This piece is called Vienna. Vienna. Where once we met and fucked and forgot each other. Now I know about your new art project where you have friends and strangers take photos of themselves with flowers on their penises. Now I know about your new lover who is blonde and balding, slightly paunchy, has a friendly face and circular glasses. Now I know about your latest advances in design, the sophisticated cut of the graphics you create for clients, who are drawn in by the sleekness, the geometry of your work. Where once I forgot you, now I know all the particulars of your externals, art, partner, work. I don't know the nature of your heart, and I only just barely knew it for the time that we met. You are soft and sweet with a perverse bent that is slouchy but comfortably worn. You are realistic, but not dour. You are open to possibility. You allow yourself to submit. You allow yourself the heat of a cabin in a bar where people have sex in the back, where we entered and glowed in the red light and worked our hands all over each other, careful not to let our shirts fall to the dirty ground. Where I saw your taut white body pulse under my needy hands. Later, I fucked you so hard that the beds came apart and you suspended like a bridge over the floor, anchoring yourself on either side with flexed feet and clenched hands. You said "Daddy" because I wanted you to, but your hard consonants revealed how foreign the word lived in your mouth. You broke my rule and stayed the night, not by intention, but because of the lateness and the exhaustion. But I was upset with myself in the morning. So much so that when you asked what I was doing that day, I said, I have a lot of work to get done. And you nodded, getting the hint, and walked out. And it was true that I had a lot of work to do. And I did it, with the window open to the inner courtyard, with church bells going off in the distance. Wind blew through the trees just outside the briefly muffled the sounds of children playing. The vastness of that apartment should have been an enticement for me to want to stay, but it was the whiteness in the red room, the duplicitous suggestion of order that the apartment building and all the adjoining buildings promised, and the false promise of peace on the streets. Peace that only lives because it suppresses harsher truths, that repelled me then and which have repelled me for years. I could never live there, stay there, fuck you again and again, laugh as hard as I want to at jokes, and pretend that my skin makes sense there. Even now when I go over it, when I close my eyes and conjure the perfect, uncomplicated excitement of our one night together, I am relieved when I come and return to the sounds and touch of this place, however unforgiving it may be. But your image does continue to appear, and I get slightly new variations of your presence, as if made by a mimeograph with a mind of its own. I have recorded some of this, and I've invented other parts. I did then as well. That's Vienna. Oh yeah, it's gonna be dirty. Sorry, content warning. Fucking always. So yeah, as Imogen alluded to, I'm in school. I went back to college. I never finished college, and with things being the way they are, I thought I should try to finish college this year since all my work dried up. So it's been kind of incredible and humbling. I'm a senior. As I say, quite the senior. At school, and I'm finishing in May. And one of the beautiful things about being a student again is that I have homework that I have to fulfill. So this is the next two things that I'm giving you are from homework that I did for a class I took last semester with Rick Moody. And shout out to Rick, because Rick has been very sweet and generous to me. If I get as far as I don't know if I'll get as far as that in this, but there is a discussion of suicide in this one. So this piece is called Ongoing Catalog of Illnesses and Injuries with Possible Omissions. Age 4. I jammed my thumb in a mysterious accident. There's a photo of me falling asleep on the coffee table, folded over at the hips with my head turned to the side, trying to suck my bandaged finger. Later in life, when training in the Feldenkrais method, I learned how to gently massage people in the same position. Ages 5 through 8. I'm obsessed with Helen Keller and the lesbianic vibes in her relationship to Annie Sullivan, so I pretend to be blind or deaf, never both, out of a respect for Helen, on multiple occasions. When at the mall, I turn to my mother and pretend to sign, and she responds by yelling, "No haga eso! You should be grateful to God that you have all your faculties intact." And I gesture and mouth, "But I can't hear you." In department stores, my mother shops, and I sit at the mannequin's feet, look out blankly to the racks of clothes while calling, "Mami, mami, ¿dónde estás? No te veo." These ill-advised attempts at sensory deprivation, which is not one, foretell a fascination with sensory perception, a narcissistic impulse towards fabulation, and eventually an acceptance of the limits of empathy. Ages 5 through 12. I'm struck with bouts of severe asthma. One of the worst, when I'm 9, kicks in the night before I'm to perform as Fritz, Clara's feckless and jealous brother in the Vern Fowler School of Performing Arts' production of The Nutcracker. My role involves ripping the Nutcracker out of preternaturally lucky Clara's hands in a fit of rage because of Dr. Drosselmeyer, our uncle's unseemly attentions to her in the form of animatronic dolls, a soldier, a doll, and this fucking Nutcracker who is a soldier and a doll. My inability to breathe keeps me up for the whole night with my mother ministering to me. As usual, my father's on a business trip in South America, so he'll be missing my heroic against all odds performance. I do the damn show, which happens in a wing of the Menlo Park Mall in front of Alexander's department store, and afterwards I collapse to the floor in the men's bathroom, hair pasted to my forehead. Age 9. The orthodontist makes a mold of my teeth with the foamy clay that tastes like a mixture of bubblegum and bile. I marvel at this zigzagging sculpture of my interior, which reveals that not only are my teeth wayward as fuck, but my upper palate is narrower than my lower. I have a medieval rack-like device inserted into my upper mouth that looks like a tiny pair of plastic lungs, bridged by a dumbbell grip. And every morning and every night, my mother inserts a needle-sized metal key into the center axle of the device and cranks it backwards towards my uvula, which affects a micro-spreading of the lungs, and in turn, my palate. It's weird to feel your own skeleton stretching. Years later, after they remove my braces, I forget to wear my retainer, and I am left with snaggle teeth forever. Age 14. My parents go to Southside Seaport for the evening, which gives me the chance to get drunk for the first time, which I do by myself, a harbinger of how my alcoholism and drug addiction will play out. I make screwdrivers because it's the only drink I know how to make, and laugh out loud, in the traditional sense, as I quite literally bounce off the walls. In subsequent teenage drunks, I get intrigued by signing my name and watching it deteriorate the drunker I get. Age 15. I'm home alone, and while running up the stairs, I stub the second toe on my right foot, dislodging the end metatarsal up and over like a poorly stacked book. Oh. I get on. That's right, Arthur. Sing it. I get operated on twice because the doctors misaligned the bones the first time around. In both operations, it's just local anesthesia, so I watch on a monitor that they're using to blow up the image of my foot. People usually never watch these operations, the doctors exclaim. Yeah, well, it's my foot. Age 17. On the Friday morning before the spring weekend that I'm meant to check out Columbia University to decide between it and Brown, I wake up in excruciating pain with one testicle 3 times the size of the other. Convinced this must be the blue balls kids talk about at school, I masturbate because I heard that's what you're supposed to do if you have blue balls. I then take a shower, and when I'm done, I can barely stand. The pain is so bad. Mom! I scream. My balls! My dad gets me in the car to take me to the hospital, and every time he hits a pothole, I curse him out. The ER nurse has an inexplicably lax approach to the sign-in process, so eventually I scream, "My balls!" at her to keep it moving, to move it along. They give me a painkiller and lay me down butterfly position, crotch exposed, on a table with 2 heavy lead pads on my inner thighs, while an enormous MRI machine, or whatever it was in the 80s, slowly lowers till it's hovering above my modest junk and zaps me with cancer-causing rays. It will take about 30 minutes to create the necessary internal image. The cheery nurse, different one, tells me. So I lay there half naked from the waist down as nurses and doctors casually walk in and out of the room. Maybe this room doubles as the dispensary? In any case, about 15 minutes in, the painkillers start to wear off, and the pain reemerges, growing incrementally like the sound of an approaching lowrider playing bass-heavy rap. After the operation, I have to wear special underwear with cutouts for my balls, and I return to school walking bow-legged like a cowboy, convinced everyone is going to laugh at me. Instead, most of the boys cower from me in the halls like I'm the ghost of Christmas future, while a few of them place sympathetic hands on my shoulder and say, "Oh man," and I gravely intone back, "It could happen to you." Age 18. The morning after the evening that I come out to him, my dad lays into me on the drive back to Providence, and he tells me that I'm an abomination against God. Time slows down and my body loses strength, so the sobs come as lethargic ripples as I turn to look out the passenger side window, tears just streaming. Later that day, I go to my school mailbox and find out I failed one of my first semester classes. I return to my dorm room to a message from my dad, who sounds like he's had some drinks. "I love you. I'm sorry. I love you. I love you." I may be making up the "I'm sorry" part. Age 18. Riddled with cystic acne that bleeds through my t-shirts when I do floor work and dance rehearsal, I go on Accutane, which packets are covered in "Don't take this if you're pregnant" warning labels. The drug dries me up like a raisin, and for the first time in my life, I have to moisturize heavily to counter the ashiness. That same semester, beaten down by the crumbling relationship with my homophobic parents, I contract mono and stop showing up to German class. I run into Professor Poor on Thayer Street the last week of the semester and say, "See you at the final," and she cocks her head at me. I thought you had withdrawn. Come to my office, where I shamefacedly prey on her presumed sympathies as a disabled woman and weaponize the semester's abjection into an epic, aggrandized performance of put upon child of homophobic South American immigrant parents who don't understand me, Professor Poor. The ruse works. She lets me take the final, and I get a B. Ages 18 and 19. Sexual compulsion joins the list of addictions. Age 19. I get very stoned and go to Clubstitute on Valencia Street. Soon after I start drinking my first vodka tonic, my heart starts beating faster and harder, and I become immobilized. People walk past me, oblivious to my paralysis. Age 20. While talking to my friend Jeremy on the phone, he tells me that Russ, my romantic obsession in San Francisco, has started seeing someone else. I'm sitting on the living room couch in my house on Ives Street, and my body starts to deflate the way it did in the car with Dad. I try to explain what's happening to my body to Jeremy. I think what you're having is called a panic attack. Age 23. In the middle of rehearsal with Joe Good Performance Group, we're talking about HIV and death, and I realize it's a year to the day that I found out my friend and former dance partner Mark died of AIDS. That draining feeling takes over again, and I get up and leave rehearsal to stumble down 16th Street in the Mission and see my friend Gretchen in a cafe, who immediately sees that something's wrong, and she sits me on the curb while I ride out the hyperventilation. Age 24. I go to the PJ Harvey concert at the Warfield with Kevin. We get high in the middle of Ben Harper's opening set, and the paranoia kicks in so hard that I have to move to the back of the crowd to lean against the wall till the panic subsides. Ages 22 to 25, multiple wisdom teeth infections. Consistently, right before going on tour with Joe Good, I get severe infections from impacted wisdom teeth. The worst one kicks in on a Monday morning as we're driving to Humboldt County State College after a weekend when my boyfriend and I take speed and ecstasy at Club Universe. We meet hot Japanese boy Ken and take him home to have sex for 20 hours. Anyway, on the drive, I feel a fever setting in, and by the time we get to the campus, I'm foggy and can't do much. I go to the doctor the next day, and she tells me there's an abscess in my throat so enormous that she has to inject medicine directly into it. I grip my friend and co-company member Sue Ellen's hand as the doctor comes at me with the needle. She sends me back to my room with a 3-day superdose of azithromycin. On the day of the show, I take 8 Advil to get my lockjaw to open wide enough so I can sing. Age 25. One hot summer night, I'm ambling down 2nd Avenue with Blank, the sexy white blonde jewelry designer I started sleeping with. He has 2 blow pops with him, different flavors, and asks me which one I want. Cherry, I say. He smirks as he hands it over. The brown boys always want cherry. I wince and want to say something, but I don't know what. And anyway, his linen shirt is open down to his flat belly, and the golden configuration of his chest hair makes me crazy. Plus, he always has drugs. Age 26. It's a Friday night. I get stoned and I meet up with my friend Charles at the boiler room, where we get drunk and do coke in the bathroom. On my way home, I see Daniel, a friend and former fuck buddy, on the other platform at the Lorimer Street station of the L train. I get his attention and say, "Hey, there's something I want to give you." And I jump down to the tracks and cross over to the other side. And as I'm hoisting myself up to the platform, I bang my knee very hard under the platform edge. I give Daniel a flyer to my show and limp my way home. My knee is still slightly swollen and hurting when I do my show 3 days later at Monday night at the Judson Church, the first presentation of my work in New York. Ages 26 and 27. I have a persistent cough and can't really bend my right foot, which is a problem given that I spend most of my days at dance rehearsal. Oops. And most of my nights working at a restaurant. I go to an acupuncturist for the first time and I have to fill out an intake form that asks how much I drink. Once a month? No. Once a week? No. Once a day? Not quite. 2 times a day? Barely. 3 times a day? Okay, now we're getting somewhere. It's one of the first times I get evidence on paper. The acupuncturist looks at the form, then looks at my tongue and says, "Wow, you're really exhausted, aren't you?" And I burst out crying. She says, "You have gout." And I'm like, "Isn't that a 17th century disease you get on a boat?" She says, "No, that's scurvy." Age 27. Gay Pride NYC. I go home from the Eagle with a guy named Jericho who lives in Queens. I have an appointment the next morning to renew my passport, and I've left all my shit at my friend Eric's apartment. So early in the morning, I race, hungover, back to the East Village, get my bag of documents, waking up Eric and his trick, and get on the subway to go to the main post office on 8th Avenue to get a money order. As I come out of Penn Station, I race across the street to beat traffic. I'm wearing red Adidas sweatpants, unzipped at the bottom to affect the kind of bell-bottom look, and my sneaker gets caught on the cuff, so I trip and land on my stomach and hands and skid across the lane. But the traffic's coming, so I race to my feet to realize that my knee, my hands, and my chest under my t-shirt are now scraped and bloody. I hobble my way to the sidewalk and limp up the stairs. I'm leaving for France the next day to perform at a festival in Montpellier. And then this will be the last one. Age 27. A few weeks after getting sober, I'm at the boiler room, where I run into John at the bar and we talk for a few hours. We're flirting, or at least I think we are. And at about 2 a.m., I pull the old, "So what are you going to do right now?" To which he says, "Oh, I think I'm going to stick around and see what happens." I'm devastated. I begin to ride my bike home, but a guy on the street cruises me, so I stop and we go to his place where I do poppers and where we do poppers and I fist him. I spend the rest of the night trying to figure out if that counts as a relapse. Oh, you guys, life lived. Mistakes were made. Anyway, I'm going to share this piece is a video piece. Again, it came out of an assignment. The assignment was to make a piece about belief. Can you all see what looks like a phone? All right, here we go.
Do you believe in life after love?
Another shitty poem about dad. Listening to Alice Coltrane glide down the scales across the hall from when my father died. When the nurse said, I think that was his last breath, I ran to his side, my eyes aglow to make a suburban pietà, holding his hand, but he had more in him. 3 breaths with long spaces in between. My mother took his other hand. We were ushers to the transition, witnesses, audience members, stewards, hangers-on, supplicants, son and wife. I wanted glory and gates crashing open, the ceiling to collapse, flames in the sky, flames in the room, a shaking bed, the Holy Spirit to extrude from the and blind us. Instead, there was a long wheeze and a wave of sickly yellow that crossed his face like the turning of a page. It was as clear as anything that the body is just a costume, a rental really for a mess of feelings put into a shape I called father. I asked the nurse to leave us. She said, of course, of course. I sobbed high-pitched screams, keening on the carpet. My mother did too. What she knew, 11 years of illness, 8 years of diaper changing, sometimes 3-4 times a night, holding him up as he stood trembling with hands on the water. She took scissors, cut the sides of the cloth, pulled out from the diaper below, and left the diaper above. The wobbly dance of getting him to sit without falling on the side of the slippery bed, his brittle tension necessary to embrace. As he held onto her neck and puckered his mouth, waited while she lowered him for the eternity of the pillow. Now Alice is chanting, now Alice is chanting. Our servant came. He went straight up to heaven for sure, said my tone, damn. He went nowhere, I thought, nowhere I could see or understand. The universe stripped of me, this world's no words of prayers, and turned into hell. And the ambulance came, the gently MATs vacated us. We waited on the couch as they left him out of sight, then enrolled him in the living room. My mother wailed, me están sacando mi corazón. They're taking out my heart, and I felt the knife plunge through me. Body, soul is one, into the center of all that I am. Her total grief. What have I known of her? What did I know of them? 55 years, 1 month and 1 day together. The gurney kept going. They stopped by the door. Everyone but me bowed their heads. My other aunt led the Our Father, but it was my father, who art nowhere, in the smoke of this poem. Alice sings Krishna, but I believe nothing. Thank you.
Miguel Gutierrez, everyone. Thank you so much, Phoebe. That was amazing and everything that I knew it would be. I'm really excited for this Q&A that we're going to have later because there's just a lot of questions, you know, a lot of things that we can talk about. I had some like craft questions, but we'll talk. Anyway, we're going to take about a 6 to 7 minute break. We're going to play some Arthur Russell. We encourage everyone to donate whatever you can. There will be a link on the screen. All the money goes to the artists. Come back in like 5 minutes for Ishmael Houston Jones and then a Q&A. It's going to be amazing.
Hi all, welcome back to our second half of tonight's Segue performance. Featuring now, also, thank you, Miguel, that was transporting. Our second half featuring Ishmael Houston Jones. Ishmael Houston Jones is an author, performer, teacher, curator, as well as a 3-time New York Dance and Performance Bessie award-winning choreographer. His first book, Fat and Other Stories, was published in 2018 by Yonkers International Press. Houston Jones's essays, fiction, interviews, and performance texts have been anthologized in numerous books, including Writers Who Love Too Much, New Narrative, 1977 to 1997. So you'll have noticed this week at Segue that we're breaking out of our rigid poetry display case, like mannequins come to life and set loose in a different part of the mall. And having Ishmael Houston Jones here to greet us feels especially apt. Houston Jones is a multidisciplinary artist, a tireless experimentalist, an insatiable movement worker, a simpatico fellow traveler of freak shit poets, and a consummate writer of pornographic realism. In his dance and writing, both solo authored and collaborative, Houston Jones enables speech and motion to extend each other's reach of expression. I think here of Houston Jones's description of a solidarity trip he took to Nicaragua in the 80s, during which he taught improvisational dance to, among other students, Sandinista freedom fighters. They took off their fatigues, he says, and put on their leotards. I first saw Houston Jones read at the New York City launch at Artist Space for the new narrative anthology, Writers Who Love Too Much, edited by Dodie Bellamy and late and much beloved Kevin Killian. Kevin said that Houston Jones's performance pieces, quote, took off from text and music and moved bodies through them like tokens across the wires of an abacus. In Prologue to the End of Everything, written with reference to that trip to Nicaragua, you can really see them move. Quote, 47, the busboy sticks his tongue in my mouth. Sorry, sticks his tongue in his mouth. 49, the busboy unbuttons Matt's pants, pulls them down and spins him around 180. 50, he thinks of his father teaching him to ride a two-wheeler. 51, he supports himself, holding on to the cold, slimy carcasses of two calves hanging from meat hooks, skinny as dogs. I suppose that last sentence is supposed to be a little gross, but actually it hits you across a mental funny bone where foreboding and arousal happen at once. From the videos, I get the sense that them, Houston Jones's performance collaboration with words by Dennis Cooper and music by Chris Cochrane was pretty similar, and what I wouldn't have given to have been in the audience. The performers pressed their hands into the lymph nodes in each other's armpits, probably a top 5 underexplored erogenous zone. Them was originally performed in 1985 as the HIV/AIDS pandemic gathered strength and force, then revived in 2010, and in the revival, Houston Jones enters the stage and blindfolds the performer who danced the role that he himself danced in the original, the future turning the past's face to the wall. Houston Jones's work passes regularly through these levels of attention, absorption, and self-consciousness. In a writing piece from his Specimen series, which features exhaustive descriptions of men of various ages, races, and classes in various stages of undress, who the narrator is paying for the privilege of describing them, Houston Jones writes, quote, he touches his right nipple, he looks like a handsome young girl. He brushes his nipple with his fingernail, he strums his flanks. When he stands, he's nearly buttless. Open parenthesis, I have to find a new way of saying buttless, close parenthesis, end quote. The breaks in these observations derived from rapid notes in a journal coalesce into a distended poem of exacting documentation, as much of the narrator's patterns of attention as the narratee's asslessness. Or in a neighboring story from Fat and Other Stories, some writing about sex, Houston Jones describes an episode of fisting a young bored escort in which the narrator hoists himself, half disinterested, out of the sex he's paid for and into his own sentences. Quote, I get up to dispose of the gloves, smelling at first, of course. I'm still in my underwear. I change the music and go to my desk and begin to write this. All the while his trick is, quote, a giant contented baby snoozing serenely with big feet and a greasy butt. I think this pivot between presence and quotation, between the work's absorption in its moment and its sudden attention to itself, is one of the characteristics that gives Houston Jones's work its particular tension and elasticity, and allows it to pivot so nimbly between moments and concepts. The protagonist of the title story, Fat, goes to a kink fair where he finds he's, quote, the only black man in the room, submitting to a whipping with arousal that surprises him, quote, he had visions of Roots or Mandingo or that Haitian who had been tortured by cops in that Brooklyn precinct. The symbols Attica escaped his lips with each exhale like a staccato mantra. Houston Jones uncovers the psychic actuality of desire and finds it no more twisted and palpable than life itself. In a 2017 interview in The Believer, a couple years before he passed, Kevin Killian suggested that self-embarrassment for new narrative writers forms a signature technique of composition. Quote, I'm set, he said, so long as I continue to do bad things. I can't stop now. I think Houston Jones's writing could be exemplary of this mode, with its clumsy, canny protagonists and greased arrangements of bodies in steam rooms and meat refrigerators. And yet there's nothing moralistic about it, just the realism of what people want, what they get paid, and what they pay attention to. If this is a rake's progress, it tempts you not to death, but to more and more life. And in this, I think it forms a parallel to Houston Jones's performance. And I have to say, watching videos of them and relatives and variations on themes from Lost and Found, which Houston Jones did with Miguel Gutierrez, I felt parts of my brain come to life that had been dormant for months and months now. Houston Jones's writing never flinches, his performances invigorate, and we are so lucky to have him with us tonight. Please welcome Ishmael Houston Jones.
Wow, thank you, thank you. These intros are really, really crazy. I hope I can live up to them, actually. I'm sitting here on Manahata Island in the East Village. And I'm actually gonna go against Miguel, and I'm gonna read a lot of old stuff. But when I was gathering stuff to read, I was thinking, especially during the pandemic and isolation and quarantine, how important community is. And all the 3 pieces I'm reading tonight were all developed in a writer's group sort of a ragtag, self-deprecating writers group, which included Lucy Sexton, Joe Westmoreland, Laurie Weeks, Lori Eastside, Kyle DeCamp, and when she was in town, Annie Yopes. And they were like, being in that community and writing and reading to these people was so important to my development as a writer, since I don't actually self-identify as a writer usually. So I wanted to tell just a little anecdote about Miguel and myself, that I met Miguel in San Francisco. I was out there for a festival, and at the last night of the festival, the organizer said, "Oh, there's a going away party for this guy, Miguel Gutierrez. Do you want to go?" And the prospect of free beer led me there. And I don't remember if Miguel and I actually spoke to each other that night, but it was like, I was so impressed that people were crying. People were like, they were like sending him off. They were happy that he was going to New York, but they were really sad to lose him. And I knew that this guy was going to be someone special. And our lives have sort of intersected and intertwined over the years, culminating in the piece we did in 2016, Variations on Lost and Found. So that said, the first thing I'm going to read is actually, it's been published in several things. It's a piece called Vigils, but the copy I have here is from Sunday Magazine, which is the arts magazine of Middle Collegiate Church, which is sort of my spiritual home. Middle Collegiate Church, you may know, is on 2nd Avenue and 7th Street, burned to the ground in December, and was a big tragedy in my life, but we continue on online in Zoom land. But I think it's really rad to have a church that has an arts magazine. And also it's a church where, for the first time, I got arrested at a demonstration. So I love Middle Collegiate. Oh, and a trigger warning, there is no sex in this first story. Vigils. One Saturday morning in 1967, I joined a small group of Quakers standing in silent opposition to the escalating war in Vietnam. We stood on a downtown street corner next to the Capitol grounds in my native Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I was a high school junior. My mother was worried about my safety. My father, a veteran, didn't approve. Some yahoos yelled at us from cars. I remember some tossed tomatoes. I don't remember exactly what led me to tumble out of bed that weekend morning and stand silent with a group of white strangers gathered around a solitary banner. I don't remember the exact words on that banner, but I'm certain that that decision on that Saturday morning became the foundation of my political social activism that is carried forth through today. I spent several afternoons and evenings a week after that manning the tiny Harrisburg area Peace Center storefront. It was really tiny. Hanging out with older activists, street people, hippies, and hippie wannabes. I handed out leaflets, did my schoolwork, and talked to anyone who straggled through the door. An End the War Now bumper sticker was affixed to my notebook for the rest of that school year. I remember waking up to do my paper route one June morning in 1968 to be the first in my family to learn of the assassination of Robert Kennedy. Martin Luther King had been murdered earlier that spring. That summer, I worked for the political campaign of Eugene McCarthy, volunteering at the Market Square headquarters. I remember watching on a black and white TV with my fellow volunteers, all of us in shock as the police rioted in the Chicago streets during the Democratic National Convention. I remember spending the night in Perry Square in Erie, Pennsylvania in 1969. Now a college freshman, I was part of a group taking turns reading the names of the war dead from books the size of telephone directories. I shuddered when it was my turn to read, and I came to Jones, Charles, USMC, the name of my grandfather, my uncle, and my legal self. I remember a year later stenciling bloody fist on the walls of the college buildings after the murder by National Guardsmen of students at Kent State University and the always parenthetical Jackson State. I remember that when the first Vietnam War draft lottery was drawn, my birthday, June 8th, was number 366 out of 366, but I was 1 year too young to be included. When the subsequent lottery was drawn, June 8th was number 7, but the deferments were still given out to college students. During my draft physical, I was given the 1Y, don't call us and we'll probably never call you status, after talking very frankly with the Army shrink about psychedelic drug use, sexual orientation, and a lame suicide attempt. I dropped out of college to travel the world. I remember after spending almost a year on kibbutz in Israel, marching in a May Day parade in Tel Aviv, chanting in Hebrew, what is good for the worker is good for Israel. I think it's something like, Masha Tov LaHapolim Tov LeIsrael. I remember marches on Washington in the 1980s for gay rights, against the Klan, for the rights of Palestinians to determine their future, in solidarity with the people of El Salvador. I remember chanting, sore feet, and the smell of tear gas. I remember marching up Fifth Avenue with my boyfriend on Gay Pride. I remember marching up Fifth Avenue with my girlfriend against nukes. I remember standing in front of the United States Embassy in Managua, Nicaragua, and singing a song that one of my fellow artists, Robbie McCauley, had written to counter our government's support of the Contras. I remember denouncing the US support in a statement I gave on Managua radio. I remember trying to combine my politics and my art and sometimes succeeding. I danced naked to the sound score of pro-American jingoist songs. I wrestled with a dead goat on a bare mattress. I crawled across the stage on my back, blindfolded, a light glaring in my face, a heavy cement block on my chest. In the 1990s, I remember marching against the spread of the AIDS epidemic and our government's apathy toward the pandemic. I remember once or twice a week delivering food to people left homebound by the disease. I'd carry meals to walk up apartments and in most cases leave immediately like the delivery boy that I was. Eventually people would disappear from my list. Either they'd gotten better or... I remember not accepting my National Endowment for the Arts Choreographers Fellowship because an anti-homoerotic and obscenity clause had been added. A year later, someone on the staff of the NEA allowed me to obtain the funds without signing. I remember getting on with my life, that's in quotes, burying parents, buying a home, archiving my work, combining my politics and my art making with a money-making job. And then last night, I stood in the rain in Union Square in New York. I stood there with a few hundred people in what passes in this city as a silent candlelight vigil, marking the 1,000th American soldier killed in the war in Iraq. I found my friend Lucy with her 1.5-year-old daughter, Annabelle Claire. At home, Lucy has a photograph of her parents with her and her siblings at a Vietnam War protest. I took a picture of Lucy and Annabelle to be a companion image to that other photo, a sad but resilient continuum. As I stood in the rain trying to keep my candle lit and counting the number of other colored folks present, never enough compared to the other brown faces pictured next to the obituaries and papers, this deluge of memories flooded over me. From that Saturday morning in the late 1960s to that evening, I've been doing this in some form for too long. As some of the crowd sang quietly, anemically, "We shall overcome, where have all the flowers gone, and give peace a chance," I thought to myself, I'm tired. I'm so tired. A double-decker tour bus stopped at the traffic light, and our crowd turned, raised peace signs, and sang louder, stronger. Cameras flashed on both sides. The bus drove on. I'm just so tired. 10 September 2004. So as Kay said, in 2018, I published my first and only book. It's called Fat and Other Stories, Some Writing About Sex. And there is some writing about sex in it. Weird sex, but sex, you know, sex is weird. So I'm going to read two pieces from it. In the main story, Fat, and actually Kay read a bit of it already. I'm going to put my glasses on, actually. There's an unnamed protagonist. He's a slightly overweight African-American man in his 40s in 1999, living in a small, cluttered East Village apartment that doesn't resemble anybody I know. He's trying, at this part, this is very near the beginning of the piece. He's trying to get out of bed. He wants to get out of bed before mid-afternoon. He's made a bargain with himself that he's going to masturbate, but he's having trouble finding the right image. And lying there, he began to think about how memory really works. He thought apple. The thing, not the word. If he closed his eyes, he could see the object, round, green, red, green, or golden. He immediately saw Granny Smith because that was his favorite, but he could change that to other types. That was to say, he could remember what stuff looked like. Dead dad in his coffin, postcard from Ruby Falls, Tennessee, newborn piglets, Johnny Harden, Coach Dibbler, and some boy on the subway yesterday. But if he tried to remember the smell of the Granny Smith, he'd be stumped. He tried. He knew if someone were wearing a trendy fragrance called Sour Apple, he'd recognize it immediately. But trying to conjure up the exact aroma of anything that didn't smell like snot or phlegm, and it was useless. No hyacinth, no rotting fish, no banana pancake, no strawberry herbal shampoo, no armpit, no pissy pubic hair, no butthole, nothing, not even feet. So he came to the uninspired conclusion, remembering what sex looks like is different from sex itself. Duh. Taste is so combined with smell that anything that was not mucus, not coffee, not tobacco, not remnants of the last thing he'd eaten was pretty much moot. But what about sound? Key and lock, yes. Bed squeak, yes. Opening riff of Marvin Gaye's Sexual Healing, yes. Actor in bisexual porn video imitating Robert De Niro in Taxi Driver while fucking a man while being ordered about by two dominatrices who are having sex with one another, yes. Someone unnamed saying, "Oh, fuck me, fat man," yes. Yes, he could remember the sounds of sex. Touch was tricky. He couldn't be sure, but he thought he could remember the exact satin-like oiliness of the dancer's skin. The precise feeling the first time someone touched his 11-year-old hard-on, belt against his 13-year-old butt, whip against his 40-something-year-old back. Master Lee. His business card was probably still buried somewhere beneath the detritus on his desk. He'd seen an announcement in a free day bar weekly for an exhibition of S&M tools and techniques. He'd never been into this subgenre of the life, but since the leather guys he'd seen around town seemed to be scarcely concerned with waist size and hair, he thought he should give them a try. He showed up early at the community center expecting the sexy, dark atmosphere of screams and desire. What he found looked like an all-male PTA meeting, complete with a sign-in sheet, coffee urn, and a tin of Danish butter cookies. The organization was wrapping up their monthly meeting. The chairman was pleading for someone to please take over the outreach and fundraising committees. The secretary read a listing of upcoming events. Everyone seemed more than neighborly and hospitable. Some of the daddies were even older than he was. Some were stouter. He was not sure he had stumbled into the right room, but as the meeting was adjourned, all the metal folding chairs were screeched to the sides and stacked. Long folding tables were set up, each with its own subcategory of torture devices. He felt more than a little self-conscious being there alone. Owning any leather except his vaguely corporate jacket, he put together an outfit of an old of an old plaid flannel shirt, denim vest, torn jeans, and oxblood Doc Martens. He was obviously an outsider, but the harnessed and mustachioed members were amiable and beckoned him to each waiting table. There was the rope table, the cigar table, the electric shock table, the clips and clamps table, the mummification table, the whip table, and the mask and gag table. Each had one or two specialists explaining techniques and to hand out brochures. Everything, it turned out, was for sale. As he table hopped from clips and clamps to masks and gags, he struck up a wordless eye contact kinship with a much younger, much thinner, tattooed and pierced fellow solo window shopper. This kid had put together a much trendier variation on the S&M aesthetic. Shaved head, wire rim glasses, ancient blue and white The Smiths t-shirt, kilt over ripped jeans, and knee-high lace-up boots. Some of the more hardcore regulars regarded this upstart as an alien on their turf, while others clearly wanted to wrap him up and take him home and play daddy to this wiry young punk. The youngster gestured over to the whip table. That's where he first saw Master Lee. He and the kid were the only ones at the table. Master Lee began to explain the difference between cat o' nine tails, and floggers, more than 9, and the variations among the different leathers used, how each produced either more of a thwack or more of a thud. The thwack was a stinging sensation. The thud was one of pressure. The shinier the finish, the more of a thwack. Master Lee, with his Hun gray eyes, blonde crew cut, and goatee and circled lips, asked which he was into. Not sure, he thought for a moment. The thud, I guess. Master Lee picked up a beautiful sample, 27 strands and all genuine moose hide. Want to try? He admitted he'd never done anything like this, but Master Lee assured him, here, take off your shirt and come over to the wall. I'll stop this section here. It goes on and on and on. The last piece I'm going to read is the oldest piece. It's from 1986. It's called Prologue to the End of Everything, and I'm going to try a little Zoom magic to get sound going. I can do this. The Prologue to the End of Everything was written in 1986. I had just come back from teaching in Nicaragua, which Kay alluded to. And also 1986 was the height of the AIDS area. It still continues on to today. So I wrote this Fantasia. Also at this time, I had begun only writing my work in this. And this is written in a list, as a list of numbered sentences. Sound okay? Okay. Prologue to the End of Everything. There's a protagonist named Matt. The airport had been closed for almost 2 weeks. There was a ban on exit visas. Matt sleeps and dreams of iguanas calling him to the vacant lot. Strawberries the size of baby's red kids. A women in damp blouses, denim skirts, and pink plastic candles. He dreams of sucking on ice cubes and the busboy's eyelashes. He wakes up, a wrestler defeated by his own sweaty sheet. 2. He wakes up, and assured by the sound of lizards being prepared. 3. He wakes up, takes a piss in a green plastic bucket, takes a short look at 2 unfilling stores, spits out some red, foamy toothpaste, rinses his mouth with rum, takes a painful, watery, documentation strip, checks the blood, sprinkles some pine oil into the bucket. 4. Matt heads to the cafe. He never loved the cafe. He was busy before across from the Palace Hotel. the only one that's still open. 5. He steps over a few new bodies. His heat is bearable with dust. 7. Toes curl up under inside his feet. 8. There were more bodies than yesterday. 9. A few left over from the day before. 10. Squads are getting sloppy or overworked. 11. He gets to the palace. 12. The same woman and little girl is begging on the corner. 13. Woman is dead. 14. The girl holds a cup very to her head. 15. A sign in her language is taken her teacher. 16. It reads, Blessed Mother, protect my precious one. 17. He drops some sweat-crumpled pills into the cup. 18. About 25.5 cents left. 19. The girl doesn't say thank you, not even automatically. 20. He thinks this is unusual, he thinks. 21. He thinks she'll probably be dead by nightfall. 22. At the cafe, the birthday was held next side last evening. 23. Has 4 people in his family this month. 24. He expresses his sorrow and orders a rum. 25. He orders a rum. 26. There's an attractive university student reading Grand Canon at the table. 27. There were listless parrots in huge cages. 28. There's the busboy he always would have picked. 29. He orders a rum. 30. He orders a rum. This one with a bottle of soap, with a capsule on, please. And he adds needlessly, of course, without height. 31. It's strange to see the headlines in the key newspapers. 32. Death's goal is always in the upper right corner. Assurances that scientific help is coming from the outside. A message from the First Lady, something about the World Football Cup, 33, and a factory nearby that manufactures binary chemical weapons has been taken over by 34. But the attractive student's nose has begun to bleed. 35, badly. 36, and people are running down the street past the Power Hotel, ripping up shrubbery, blowing paving stones. 37, it's a lot like TV. 38, the waitress takes the attractive student a cooking bag and focuses it back. 39, more people are running, screaming in the streets. 40, the parrots wake up to beat their wings against the bars of their cage. 41, he hears what could be firecrackers or gunshots or mortar fire, and he thinks he really should learn the difference. 42, he thinks out loud, what I should do is get my flat ass back to New York and fast. 43, paving stones are being thrown at the cafe, tables overturned. 44, the busboy says, follow me, I'll be safe, and leads him into the walk-in box. 45, all he can hear is the sound of the motor. All he can feel is cool air. All he can smell is fresh clean blood. 46, the busboy says in his language, we'll be safe here. 47, the busboy sticks his tongue into Matt's mouth. 48, Matt thinks of Elizabeth's latest letter after what he doesn't come home and take that teaching job. 49, the busboy unbuttons Matt's pants, pulls them down, and spins him around 180. 50, he thinks of his father teaching him to ride a two-wheeler. 51, he supports himself holding onto the full slimy carcasses of 2 calves hanging from meat hooks, skinny as dogs. 52, he hears the busboy's pants and gets behind him and he thinks of Penny, not mistaken. 53, the busboy slaps his ass. 54, he here's loud and out in the heavy metal in the school. More screams for breaking glass, more parrots squawks and firecrackers. 55. Your legs are very beautiful, but what are those marks? Asked the busboy in his language. 56. It's the end, Matt answered. 57. And no, it's not the end. 58. Fingers dig into the fat and muscle teeth you have. 59. The busboy orders. Relax. 60. It's not the end, it's the beginning. The beginning of the end of everything. Thank you. And then cut the music.
Hi, wow. Thank you so much. It's wonderful to hear that again. I think I actually heard that first in the audience at Artists Space in the flesh. Remember when?
Wow.
Thanks, Ishmael.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Thank you both. So to the audience, we have that Q&A function at the bottom, so feel free to send us your questions now. If it's okay, I'd love to start off. I want to know what that action was at the church where you got arrested.
It was during the Affordable Care Act. We actually got arrested in Washington. We started yelling at Mitch McConnell in the Senate from the balcony and got handcuffed and fingerprinted. I want to find my mugshot though.
Please.
Beautiful. He deserves more than a good yelling at.
I have a question that
Yeah, go for it.
I would love to start this off with. First of all, thanks both of you. We knew this was going to be hot, and y'all didn't disappoint. You never do. Okay. Regarding the John Byrne piece that you both collaborated on, which feels kind of like a remix, I suppose you could call it. Can you talk in general about your collaborative process? And, for example, did one of you, you can talk about the artistic collaborative process, or you can just spill the tea, whichever is more entertaining here.
We could do both.
But I'm wondering like how you chose which segments, how you fused them together, both choreographic, imagistic, and musically, and also kind of who other ghosts were in the room with you while you were doing that.
There were a lot of ghosts. I worked with John Byrne in the 80s. He died in 1988. And I first had this idea that I was going to just recreate one of his pieces outright. And I was dissuaded from doing that by Carol Mullins, who's the resident lighting designer at Dance Space Project, who lit his work in the 80s. And she told me that was the most ridiculous idea she ever heard of. So it sent me to the drawing board. I'm basically an improviser. I knew that if I was making something, I couldn't make it on other people alone. And I really thought that Miguel would relate to the work a lot. And at first, my first thought was, he would just help me. Miguel would just help me, put the choreography, the dances together. And then I think Miguel looked at about 5 minutes of videotape and we said, oh no, I'm a full collaborator. Like I'm all in. And it worked beautifully because I knew John, we were close, and I'd been in the work. I think I was too emotionally close to the work. I really needed someone who didn't know him as a person. And so it was a great collaboration. I was like, who would have thought?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say, and shout out to Nick Hallett, who John Byrne made drawings that he projected in his work. He made original music. He had worked with Meredith Monk. And then so Nick Hallett took John's recordings and songs, because he also had singing in his pieces, and kind of elevated that and reworked it into this really beautiful just enhancement and elevation of the sound. And you know, for me, it was such a, I mean, like I've said it many times before, but like, it was like this intense thing of discovering an ancestor that I didn't know I had. And it was so humbling. And of course, it makes you think of all the ancestors that we don't know about, right? And all the people that have come before us who lay the groundwork, and particularly with interdisciplinary work, you know, which is somehow always kind of like being narrativized as like a new idea, which is absolutely not. So, yeah.
Yeah. Major shout out to Nick Hallett though, because
Yeah, Nick
we
was-
had like these VHS tapes with, you know, really horrible sound quality, and it was like, and he totally rearranged all of that music and made it, you know, just sing gloriously. You know, it's just,
And I saw the last thing about the collaboration with Ish, which is like, because we have known each other for a long time and we've worked together in other things. But one of the things I loved so much about the process of working with Ish, because, you know, I'm very like, I can be very like, get the job done, you know, triple earth sign craziness, which is, you know, good. Sometimes you need that. But I love Ishmael is just, you know, has that incredible thing of like, I'd be like, what? You know, I was like, well, today we should do this, you know, and he's like, or, you know, or like, you know, and he kind of has, he has such extraordinary, he is just, he has obliqueness in his very being as a strategy, and not as a kind of like, oh, I'm gonna like fuck it up by being oblique, but more like I'm looking at this from this other point of view. And to see that so directly was really beautiful to get to
it
live
was actually so easy. Maybe it was the difference of earth and air together somehow. It's on a total air sign. So yeah, and the choices were really easy. I mean, we put it together amazingly quickly, actually.
yeah, totally.
That's really beautiful to hear. Imogen and I came up with a bunch of questions, but there are also some in the Q&A themselves. One I'd love to read out from Daniel Lupo. Hi, Daniel. How does structuring a writing piece compare and contrast with structuring a dance piece for you guys? What do you tend to take into consideration for each?
I don't know. I think I just wrote this. I don't know if it's true or not. I wrote it recently on a Q&A that I approached them both very similarly, that it's material, that I'm an improviser. I'm a really good improviser and a really lousy editor. That I you know, like I like putting stuff out there, and then when I have to go back and actually work it, it's really difficult for me, or actually like setting, even though I don't usually set my choreography, just sort of setting the time and space it occupies. But I think the sort of the germ, the initial, for me, speaking only for myself, the initial impulse is so similar. Like, you know, like these things I wrote often, almost all of them just came from free writes. Like someone would give a prompt, or I would give myself a prompt and a time, like, okay, 10 minutes on vigils, you know, and write and scribble it out. And that's sort of how I sort of, and then I do go back, I force myself to go back and like shape it more, but it comes from a very, very similar place, starting place for me. Miguel?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess it feels like it's, I don't know. I'm just like, you know, wherever I go, there I am, you know, like I in a way, I don't, it's hard to parse this out. You know, writing is, there's a kind of, yeah, there's the privacy aspect of it, which is different than making group works, obviously, even though I think as an artist, even when you're making group works, you're trying to find a way to even cultivate privacy and intimacy. And I've been known to tell the people I'm working with, okay, I need a moment, you know, to think this through for myself. But you know, there is something about the witching hour with writing where you can really like, you know, at 1 a.m. sit there with the computer or with the pen and paper which I think is for me just kind of very like, was a very early, nighttime was the only time that I had to myself when I was a kid, you know, is when everyone finally went to fucking bed and left me alone. And I would just sit there doing my work next to the sound of the dishwasher. So it was just, I think writing recalls that sense of privacy for me, and that sense of maybe also agency, you know, like I am getting to be with myself.
And I called out the writing group. It was really a key to have a community of like sharing writing. And I miss that a lot. I really need to find a way of getting back to that.
Let's start it tonight.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
literally
I'll
right
make
now.
I'll make a Google
Yeah.
Doc. I'll put it in the chat, or we just like sign up.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know.
Oh my God, what if we did something chaotic, like give all the attendees like a prompt and they have to finish it before we end tonight?
Oh my god.
Wouldn't that be fun? Would that be really kind of evil?
I don't know if it'd be fun. It'd be evil.
Okay.
It's not supposed to be fun, you know? It's not supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be art. I have a question.
yeah.
Or do you want to go, Kay?
No, it's on you.
Okay. This is I don't know. How do you play and how do you rest?
I guess I'll try. How do I play? Oh my god, you guys. God, Imogen, how dare you? I don't know. It's fucked up. It's that fucked up thing when like you make play your job. Because then like what the fuck is play? You know, like I mean, I just feel like I'm just always working on something. And if I can remember that playfulness is supposed to be part of it, that's great. And that's usually about like that's again like the sociality of dance making, for example. For when I'm making group work, it's like part of the pleasure of the sociality is like hopefully there will be play that comes between us. I'm not the best person to look to towards rest. I have to be honest and say like I struggle this whole sort of like, you know, ethic of like time and rest and take care, all this stuff that people talk about all the time all over social media. I'm always like, yeah, but like the line between rest and depression for me is like razor thin. So productivity doesn't for me always equal capitalism. It means like life. It means I'm staying alive today because I have an idea that I'm feverish about. And so, you know, I it's not clean. It's not, there is no I'm not, if I were disciplined and organized in a normal way, I don't know that I would even do what I do. So I don't, you know, and I don't saying that because I want to be chaotic per se, and I think I'm a lot less chaotic than I used to be, but I think, you know, something about art and art making is it is the spillover, it is the excess, it is the well, I said I was going to start making dinner at 6 and look, here it is 10:30 and I'm still like, you know, editing or writing this thing sound or singing the stupid song over and over. You know, it's like it is this thing. It you know, it is both propulsive and it dissolves normative boundaries of temporality and space. That's what it does.
Right, and one's temporality changes when immersed in the process.
Right.
You know, this thing that you said about like, oh, it's 6 o'clock, now it's 2 a.m, you know, like that.
Very similar. I remember a couple of years ago, the realization hit me that I hadn't taken a vacation, like a real vacation in like 10 years. Because so much of my life deals with airports and airplanes and boarding passes and going places, I had sort of tricked myself into thinking I'd taken vacations when I really never had. And literally it was like a 10-year period. I was saying, someone asked me, oh, where do you go for vacation? And I was like, I haven't taken one.
Vacation.
And, you know, it's like that concept, and it's not a great thing, actually. I mean, but yeah, it's sort of like, you know, I'm surrounded by my books and stuff and ideas and scraps of paper that I write and ideas and fucking grant proposals. And, you know, it's like, I don't know if I ever really rest. It was an interesting question. Thanks, Imogen.
Yeah, I think it's a fair answer to in response to how do you rest to say I don't. I'm thinking, you know, as well, Miguel, about a couple of things. One, you're thinking about, you know, productivity. That's not always about, you know, like capitalism. Well, surely that's true, right? Because the problem with like capitalist regimes of productivity or something is that it's not actually the activity, right? It's doing it to make money for somebody else. And for, in fact, people who have a lot of it. And so it's not like the activity itself is somehow the problem. And the other thing that I'm thinking is about that biographical poem that the autobiographical poem that you read with the list of injuries and accidents, and how, you know, that is also a poem about like frenetic activity, because all those things seem to happen while you are doing something or thinking something or going somewhere about to appear on stage. I'm going to be selfish. I have a question about that. I know that there are questions in the Q&A box, and we'll get to those, but I want to ask mine, which is, I really loved in that poem that it's a poem about like vulnerability and fallibility and the fallibility of the body. And I think that that's like really interesting, especially thinking about, you know, I'm not from a dance background. I've never really danced. I clearly enjoy it whenever someone takes me to something. But that's relatively rare. I mean, right now. But, you know, one thing that's kind of interesting to me is that, you know, like, I think probably a lot of dance is focused on like a very athletic, gymnastic capable body. And so this poem that's about like a body kind of falling apart actually at like a very early age, and sort of a series of stages and accidents, like comically, but also like pretty horrifically. Like that seems to be kind of an interesting counterpoint to this sort of dominant representation of the body. I'm curious if you can talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm always the poster child for like objection in dance, but I don't want to I don't want to be, but I definitely feel like a lot of my work has been geared towards reclaiming, I won't say the abject, but like just releasing dance from the narrative of heroism, right? Releasing, you know, and there's more that's woven into that, because there's also sort of like, you know, being a ethnicized or racialized person, or, you know, walking through the world when you go to make work so often as a, you know, you're expected to be heroic in your endeavors, and to be sort of like a living testimonial to the survival of your species or something. And I totally understand that, and I can deeply appreciate actually, and I have can see work of that is valuable, absolutely. But I think my entire relationship to dance and body has always been very complicated, very fraught, you know, very like 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, one of possibility and a liberation and ecstasy at times, and then a lot of pain, a lot of emotional pain, a lot of people putting things, you know, like I wrote in that thing, like parental expectations on my actual physical body, that are, you know, where my sense of my embodied sense of self is being kind of played with by people who are quite close to me. So, and then in terms of a professional career in dance, you know, yeah, I've absolutely, you know, God, I hope I've had those dances where I like kicked ass, but it always comes at a cost, you know. It doesn't, you know, I mean, even when I was in my 20s dancing with Joe, like you know, I like literally toured with like a vat of Advil. You know, being drunk all the time didn't help, but you know, but it was, you know, there was already this compromise physically of like, this is what I have to do this to stay at this level. And so I think that really, at the end of the day, what I feel like I'm trying to always access, and even in my performance work, is that the experience of performing and being a dancing body, a moving body, is one of trying to bring the interior out, like trying to give it some information about the interior perception. And it's not all like, oh, poor me, because like, why else would I put myself there if it was just terrible all the time, obviously. But it is complicated, you know. It is and I think that complexity of what that is, and my shifting sensation and feeling about it, is very much content for me all the time, you know. But I think that this is like I mean, I don't want to put pain onto you, Ish, but I do want to say, like, you in my life have always been such an inspiration, because, well, for a million reasons, but one of them being the way that you navigate effort and action, and like how you allow yourself, very early on, to be ugly but beautiful in the ugliness, and all those kinds of things. And I think you really create this whole possibility for us to explore that.
Yeah, thank you. Because I had a very skewed idea of what dance was. I came out of like, sort of street theater. I went to a college as an English major. There was no dance or dance department there, and I didn't even think of dance as something I wanted to do, even by the age of 20. So I had this like really weird, and I also maybe too much information. Like I like hurting myself. I mean, I sort of like the sense of pain, like running in. Like there's this one dance which I will never do again, where I just sort of ran into a wall, like repeatedly running into a wall and like knocking myself down, slapping myself, which I still do. It's one of my signature moves is slapping myself. But it's sort of like the pain is real, and like this sort of like, okay, this is a body, and this body feels pain, and I'm going to share that with you, the audience. Like you're gonna, if I feel the pain, you're gonna have to watch it.
That's beautiful. I think makes like a really fixating performance. I want to read a question from the Q&A. Ishmael and Miguel, tell us about writing and desire! Exclamation mark. So that seems like it's not a question, it's a command.
No, fuck you. Whoever wrote that. I don't know. I think writing and sort of dance performance comes from a very similar place, and desire is definitely in that, and the desire is really skewed and twisted. I'm really into like a really twisted desire. My writing, like I always refer to the writing in fat as really sad porn. Like it's like porn where nobody ever gets it, basically. and it's sort of like my life. And yeah, the writing is about that. It's like that's what's interesting to me, is that like it's sort of like, I mean, I don't read a lot of porn. I sort of watch a lot of porn. And it's sort of so boring usually. It's just like, it's like body parts. And I think, sex is so much more interesting and nuanced and complicated and ugly and beautiful and smelly, and I'm really interested in that aspect. So I don't know if that answer is about desire, but that's how I sort of approach writing. My writing that is about the body and about sex.
And can I interject here? I really love that detail in your story, Kim, where the narrator is fisting the escort and withdraws and then smells the glove. I think that is just like, I mean, to speak of details that don't often appear on camera.
I think my favorite part of that is when he's doing that and he remembers that his mother's birthday is the next month. I think because that is so me, that's me having sex. Going, oh yeah, the 26th, yeah.
Right. Well, and then there's that moment where, like, the narrator is like, "Oh, I'm so bothered that I can think of these things,
right?
But I'm still thinking of them. Like, I wish I didn't have this sensation." Which again, I think like it has to do with the sort of realism that, yeah, it's wonderful to read.
I want to ask, throw another question out here. Or
I think Miguel was going to answer, but then Imogen,
I just wanted to say that well, writing and desire, like I just feel like desire is at the heart of everything. Like desire just kind of rules everything for me, and Eros kind of drives everything in terms of making, and then in terms of writing, just like my early experiences with reading and writing in public happened when I was in San Francisco when I was quite young, and I was seeing people like Justin Chin and Danielle Hell. Oh gosh, you know, Sister Spit in the 90s, and Keith Hennessy, shout out to Keith, who's I think on the call or was on the call. You know, and then yeah, just like Antozaki Shange was like a big thing for me when I was younger, and I think it was just my relationship right away to word was this kind of like this thing of like the minoritarian taking over, you know, like taking the mic and just being like, here the fuck I am, and here's my desire, and here, you know, it came up in the 80s and 90s, right? We were still trying to make space for ourselves in the most basic ways. So that just imprinted itself on me.
Okay, we've got one here from our dear friend Greer Dwarman. Hi, Greer. I always feel really moved to hear queer and dance elders talk about their youth in New York, 70s, 80s, 90s, and how social action and art felt back then. What do you feel like are some of the bridges at this point between your generations and younger generations in community as queers and artists? How are we in relationship to one another? And to say it another way, will you be my uncles? I think we all know the answer to that, Greer.
We already are, but it doesn't mean you're gonna get presents, Greer. Sorry. Do you want to take that first issue?
Yeah, sure. I mean, a lot of I mean, I teach a lot. I'm teaching like at 3 universities now. Yay, Zoom. 3 universities in 3 different states. It's really great. So I'm around a lot of people in their early 20s, and I feel like I learn a lot and I resist a lot. And there's like stuff that drives me fucking crazy about y'all. And I try to analyze and think why that is, and I try to like find my way there, and I go, oh God, I don't know, I can't do this. But there is, I mean, I feel really buoyed by a lot of the activism, especially that was happening last year in the shit show that was 2020, around 122 Community Center, and I went like marching with people and made sandwiches with people, and that there was a real sense of urgency, and it was sloppy and a lot of mistakes were made, but there was because in sort of like the early aughts, I was thinking, oh God, there's this sense of urgency that I used to feel about things, about the world, had disappeared. And like, it was like, everybody was sort of like, doing their own kind of thing. And now last year I really got, oh, like the youngins are actually doing shit. And, some of them are not. And I felt I got dragged in. I got, like doing my BLM marching and screaming at police and doing stuff that, I had done 20 years before and had not done in a while. And in terms of art making, I like, I like the fact that I've never been in a real art department in a university, because I think that somehow can sometimes be death to the creative, because you're surrounded by 18-year-olds who think you're God, and that's not a good thing for people. But I like, being sort of the gypsy adjunct, even though I don't have healthcare from my jobs. That I go and I do these sort of drive-bys at different places, and I really feel like I learn a lot, and like it changes my perception of myself and perspective. So that was a windy answer that probably didn't get there.
I mean, it's a really beautiful answer. And sorry, just to interject once more, I was also helping out at that space that was happening for a while at Performance Space, and I agree that that was like really beautiful and something that was also new to me. So yeah.
I mean, I think it's so cyclical, I mean, there's this weird way in which as you get older, there's kind of like there's recognition of things that you're like, oh, this has existed before in other kinds of ways, and the people who are young now didn't see that or didn't have that firsthand experience, and so you start to I mean, I'll just say first off, like, I don't know what the fuck age I am really, like, and I, Ishmael too, it's like, I don't know what age we are, like, I just don't know, like, I know what chronological age I am, but like, just who am I supposed to identify with? Like, I don't fucking know, because I'm always kind of, and then I have all similar with Ish. It's like, I can be driven crazy by generations that are younger than me, but when I encounter my peers or institutional bureaucracies kind of coming for young people, I get really defensive and very protective of younger generations, and I'm like, everyone's a teacher here. Everyone's a fucking teacher. So it's like, it is relative a bit to the situation. For me, sometimes there's a little bit of a frustration that younger generations can be like, elder this, elder that, but like, what happens when the elder says something you don't like? It's like, do you still want to respect the elders? It's like, we're gonna say shit you don't like. I'm sorry, and so, like, is there true traffic happening intergenerationally? Sometimes I wonder, is there a bridge? I mean, to Greer's specific question, because I profoundly resist nostalgia. Like, I profoundly try not to live in nostalgia. I just hate nostalgia. I think it's so boring. But then there are these moments where you're like, oh wow, wait, they don't know that this thing happened in this way, but it's like I said, it's cyclical. I was just describing it the other day. Like, last year I went to Poppy Juice, the party with my boyfriend Marley, who's younger than me, and I was really brought back to like club, like my favorite club in San Francisco in the early 90s was the Box at the Kennel Club, which was this very cute party, which is, for San Francisco was like a real thing, because San Francisco is so segregated and so white. And I was really like, oh, I'm in 2 time zones right now, and I know I'm a little bit too old for this one, for this party with all these young people. I felt a little bit like, hey, but I was also just so happy. Like, I was just so happy. So I don't know if that's an answer, but.
Well, it reminds me a little bit of this thing that Sarah Schulman will sometimes say about about ACT UP in the sort of first 7 years of its existence, where she'll talk about, she'll say, well, these people, one of the reasons why they were effective at what they did was that they were kind of fuck ups, and made all kinds of interesting decisions, and did all kinds of drugs, and were doing things that were not do not like translate to like a respectable or a clean life. I mean, to speak of like dirtiness. And I think that she says this like as if I can sort of interpret, I think she says this as a scold with love. And one of the reasons why she brings this up in the way that she does is she's like, well, like, you guys have to understand. Have I frozen?
No.
Oh no.
No.
Oh, wait, no.
Now you
have.
You conjured.
You had preemptive knowledge of your freezing. That's so intense.
Okay, great.
Now you're good.
Here I am. And maybe I can sometimes feel it like a dogs and earthquakes. So I think she says this as like a sort of mild scold on say, like activists and artists in their 20s and 30s who have a desire for, a very clean or pristine and professional like veneer to everything they do. And she's like, that's not what the people who you guys look up to, that's not how they actually lived. And I don't know, I take that to heart for myself and for my peers.
I'll just say the last thing I feel about it that I'm just confused about, and partly because I'm in college right now, so I'm really in this like weird time zone. And it's a question I have of just like, there's a way in which you are when you're younger and when you're in school, certainly there's a kind of ethical purity that you can demand of the world, which aligns and is incredible, and it also does create this aspirational place to move towards, that gets real complicated, and I feel like that's one of the big generational questions and divides that happens for me around, like, in what ways can we meet across these demands of ethical demands, and there's a lot more to be said there, but it's something I'm like racked with this question all the time.
Totally.
Yeah, for sure. We're now past 7, so we should probably end. But I don't know. I want to thank both of you for your again, I'll say transporting readings. Oh yeah, buy books, buy Miguel's books, buy Ishmael's
Miguel's got
book.
book. Ishmael's
Maybe,
should be in the link. In the
yeah,
chat.
Ishmael's book is in the chat. I mean, Miguel, if before we all sign off, if you want to drop links to your books in the chat, or maybe Izzy, if you're able, behind screen, if you're able.
Just write me at miguel@miguelgutierrez.org, because
Yeah.
you could get them you can get the book from 53rd State Press, but then I don't get the money. So if you ask it directly from me, then I get the money.
Okay, great. So everybody buy Miguel's book from Miguel. That's perfect. You can also donate. If you haven't donated, please donate to our readers. All the money goes to the readers. And thank you so much. Thank you, Artist Space. Thank you, Imogen. Thank you to our guests, and thank you to our audience. This has been fantastic.
You.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.